There I was contacted by the board, the new board at Blockchain Group, a publicly listed company in France, to implement the MicroStrategy playbook, but in France. And so I asked two questions. I asked, is it about Bitcoin or something else? The answer was Bitcoin. So I said, let's continue the conversation. And then I asked, is it about the MicroStrategy playbook, or is it something different, or something that would be much more complex? And no, the answer was MicroStrategy playbook. And so I laid out a strategy, and the board was aligned with it, and we moved very fast. And so we did two first raises that were initial raises, and now we just announced 600 BTC capital raise to go. You know, this chart that shows the Bitcoin companies, publicly listed companies. So we are going to go from the right side to the left side, which is quite good, of course. But we will need to keep working very hard to remain on the left side and hopefully go up in the list.
Welcome back to the channel. That was the CEO of the Blockchain Group, and they're talking about how they're running the MicroStrategy playbook, but in Europe. That is huge to see more companies adopting the Bitcoin treasury strategy. And as we can see right here, this is from Friday. In a sea of red, MSTR and STRK are some of the only green companies. Look at, we had a huge sell-off. This is because of the tariffs. And we're seeing MSTR and some of the other Bitcoin proxies perform well, while the rest of the market is actually in a lot of red. Historically, what we normally see is when the traditional market performs bad, Bitcoin performs even worse because people view it as a risk-on asset. But right now we're seeing a little bit of a decoupling with MSTR actually up 4% while the rest of the market is down. That is actually huge in my opinion. And then from the CEO of MetaPlanet here, he's saying of the top 20 best performing stocks in 2024, only 2 have stayed in positive territory in 2025. Both of those companies are Bitcoin treasury companies. So we can really start to see the Bitcoin treasury strategy playing out and being beneficial for companies because they're preserving their capital in the hardest asset in the world. You can see MetaPlanet and KULR have performed well, while the rest of the other companies have not. So we may be starting to see a little bit of a trend change where Bitcoin actually becomes both a risk on and a risk off asset, as people understand that tariffs actually don't affect Bitcoin like they affect all of these companies that are selling goods and services. And you can see here, this is over the past 6 months, what Bitcoin has done. It's up 38%. The S&P has been down 10% over the past 6 months. You can see some of the others are actually down over the past 6 months, while Bitcoin is up. We're starting to see a little bit of a decoupling from the traditional markets, and Bitcoin is becoming the hardest asset in the world. I mean, it's always been the hardest asset in the world. People are starting to understand that now. So this is really huge to see. And on Friday, we had Strategy here. They climbed 11 spots, and they're currently rated number 114 on the top traded companies in the world at around a $76 billion market cap. The price is just below $300. And we like to show this because it's huge, because in quarter 2, if MSTR shows some positive earnings and it wipes out their previous earnings reports, they could potentially be included in the S&P 500. And if they're included in the S&P 500, the higher they go up on this list here, the more allocation percent that they will get, which means more money flowing into strategy that they will then go and use that money to buy more Bitcoin, which is going to be good for the stock. So this is huge when we see them climbing the ranks here. And then on Friday, these are the most actively traded U.S. stocks. We look at this pretty much every other day. MSTR at around 7.3 billion. In the top 10 here, you can see is trading with some of the biggest companies in the world. Just to compare, Google and Netflix. Google is a $1.79 trillion market cap company. MSTR had more trading volume than Google. Netflix, $366 billion market cap company. MSTR had more trading volume than them on Friday. And this is something we've seen every single day. MSTR in the top 15 top actively traded U.S. stocks. That is huge to see. It just shows there's a lot of interest in MSTR now. And while we see all this red here, a lot of red, like I said, MSTR was up. And Saylor was kind of explaining this over on his X. He says, today's market reaction to tariffs is a reminder. Inflation is just the tip of the iceberg. Capital faces dilution from taxes, regulation, competition, obsolescence, and unforeseen events. Bitcoin offers resilience in a world full of hidden risks. So one thing to think about here is if this trend continues in the future, we see Bitcoin become more of a risk-off asset as well. Like we've seen historically, gold has been that risk-off asset. When the traditional markets with the S&Ps going down, when the QQQs going down, you see gold tend to do pretty well. At least over the past couple of years, we've seen that. Now, if we start to see that with Bitcoin, people are going to start to take note of that and want to put Bitcoin in their bag as well because they believe in a risk-off scenario, Bitcoin will perform well, like what we saw on Friday. If we start to see that trend change, people will want to buy Bitcoin for a risk-on and a risk-off scenario. So that just means owning Bitcoin in every possible scenario, guys. That is huge. So I think that change in psychology would be really huge if we can see that. And then to give an update on CleanSpark here, these are their numbers for March. Bitcoin miner, they produced in March 706 Bitcoin. They now hold over 11,869 Bitcoin. And you can see some of the other stats from CleanSpark here. And then we had GME, they completed their $1.5 billion stock offering to buy BTC. So the convertible debt offering is done. They're just sitting on a lot of cash right now. And we're just waiting to see when they're going to deploy all this money. They have around $4 to $5 billion of cash. And now they have $1.5 billion in cash from this stock offering. So we're just waiting to hear anything from them to see, did they buy the Bitcoin already? Are they waiting? When do they plan to deploy all of this money? Will they deploy some of their cash? That is yet to be seen, but this is still TBD, and we'll keep you up to date as GameStop releases more news on that. And then we have some key dates that are coming up pretty soon. Fun never stops. Next week we have CPI and PPI results for March. Forecasters are looking for 2.5% year over year. Previous year over year, CPI came out at 2.8%. So if we get a good reading, it's going to be around 2.5%. We can see inflation definitely coming down, going towards that 2% goal. One thing to think about here on true inflation, we saw inflation kind of just completely fall off a cliff since the end of January, and we're currently at the lowest levels we've seen all year at around 1.3%. And Trueflation, they have some charts out. It actually leads CPI inflation. So if this is an indicator, we could see inflation continue to come down in a rapid manner. If we go below that 2% figure, the Federal Reserve is going to kind of freak out and they're going to want to lower interest rates. And that could come very quickly. They could lower interest rates very fastly. So one thing that could play out here is we could have all this pain in the market from these Trump tariffs, a lot of uncertainty. The market sells off. Because the market sells off, people don't have as much money, which then causes the inflation numbers to come down a lot lower, maybe below 2%. The Federal Reserve may freak out and say, hey, we're actually trending below 2% inflation. We need to cut interest rates really quickly, which in my opinion, if that happens, we may see some type of V-shaped recovery with a lot of quantitative easing back into the economy, maybe a sell-off in the markets where you could buy the dip before they pump money back into the markets to kind of heal everything. That's what we've seen in the past. That is not financial advice. That is just my thoughts. Just giving you guys some thoughts there. We always just, we are continuing to dollar cost averaging into this market. So we continue to buy Bitcoin, MSTR, continuing to buy the dip. So that's what we're going to continue to do. whether the market's going down or going up. So nothing I say is financial advice. It's just my opinion. Then I have a clip here that I want to share with you guys talking about how the world is changing, how countries are looking at investment opportunities, how citizens are looking at investment opportunities, and it has to deal with gold. But you can also think about where Bitcoin could play in here. And I think Bitcoin is actually a better example of what is being discussed in this video. So I want to play the clip. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section below. Appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Like, subscribe, new content coming out every single day. My name is Aaron from Bitcoin Bros. I'm out. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.
It was unclear whether we were going to exempt gold from tariffs, which I believe we have. So there was a big move out of vaults in Switzerland, out of vaults in London to get it into New York. And look, that there are a lot of different stores of value over time. Bitcoin's becoming a store of value. Gold has historically been a store of value. I think what's interesting is, where do we see the gold demand coming from? A huge amount is from China.
Yes.
Where they, as I said, they're in the middle of an economic recession / depression. People don't trust the Chinese currency because they have capital controls. There are 1.4 billion Chinese who all want to get their money out, and they won't let them. They will let them buy gold.